Welcome to the Solid Signal podcast for the week of May 4th, 2020. You know, this one's going to be a little bit weird because I don't normally like to criticize anything at all that comes from our corporate partner AT&T. After all, we are at Solid Signal AT&T preferred dealers, and I'd like to keep it that way. And so I'm going to have to tread really carefully when it comes to this particular podcast, and I probably would be wiser not doing it, but I think that I have found a way that I can make my point and still not anger those folks over at AT&T. And that's by being honest and being respectful and not totally, geeky fanboy kind of thing, which I have been in the past. Anyway, last night was the season finale of Westworld, a show which has been going on for about 4 years now, even though it's only on its third season. And, because we end up waiting a long time between seasons, the production quality is so good. It just takes a long time to finish, and it's a very expensive show. All that having been said, last night's season finale was a little bit of a disappointment. I'm not skewering it as hard as some of the other folks that you'll find online, but I think that it was a disappointment, and the reason is that we feel like the show could have done a better job, should have done a better job. This is a show full of superstars. Evan Rachel Wood, her acting is superb, always is. And matter of fact, the entire cast, no matter where you see them or hear them, they're always top notch. This is, these are great actors. The writers, top notch, and the makers of this, of this show are just incredible. This is a great team, and yet they really, they could have delivered a home run, and instead they delivered a middling, base hit. Lucky to get to second base. By the way, I miss baseball. But, and I guess that's why the disappointment. Not because this wasn't a good piece of television, because it should have been a much better piece of television. Yes, I'm going to spoil this a little bit. I'm going to probably put a spoiler warning in the description, but also if you haven't seen the season finale of Westworld, stop listening to this podcast right away because I'm going to start talking about stuff. So here we are at the end of season 3, and humanity has been set free from this giant black golf ball that was essentially running everybody's lives for a couple of decades. It must seem like, because it seems to have. It takes a while for this kind of thing to come through, and we find out that it was really controlling the human was not controlling it, and this version of Dolores dies, except for it, that really doesn't mean anything, and I'll get to that in a second. And so what? I think that the biggest problem that Westworld is having right now is the same problem that Lost had a decade ago. Lost was a show that started with a great premise and built a huge mythology, and every season they tried to sort of take that to another level. They started small on a little island, and they kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger until they encompassed the entire universe and all of time and space. And by the time they did that, the mythology came crashing in on itself from the inside. They just couldn't sustain it. I think that Westworld probably has a better chance of not totally collapsing the same way that Lost did, because it learned some of those lessons. But season 1 having taken place completely in Westworld, season 2 taking place completely in the parks, and season 3 now moving out to the real world, where will season 4 go? And should it go? And what have they left themselves to do? These are really good questions. First of all, the question of the Doloreses. I lost track of if any of the Doloreses are truly dead except for the one, and I think that we can say that the primary Dolores, Evan Rachel Wood's Dolores, has been deleted, and since the entity, the machine that deleted her, has also been deleted, it's not likely there's a backup, but doesn't matter. And I'll get to that in a minute too. the version of Dolores that was Musashi has his head was taken off his body, but that doesn't mean he's been destroyed. And the other versions are probably all still out there, including the Scottish guy who you could never really understand. And I'm not sure, did he die? Did he just disappear? Seems to have been written out at some point. But all of these versions of Dolores have within them all of the memories up till the point that Dolores left the park. So really, even if you restored a version of Dolores and said, okay, you're the prime Dolores, that you still, you still have all of the memories you just lost a couple of months. And you could probably educate somebody with what they did, based on some archival footage or other data backups, and that would be frustrating, but okay. So there really wasn't a lot of importance there, and how shall I put it? The stakes were not high enough. I mean, Dolores was never in danger of dying. There were just so many of her, and one of them seems to be in control of Delos at the end, which is exactly what she was shooting for. So it doesn't really matter, and the other versions are just kind of all still kicking out there, including the one we found at the very end, which was completely glossed over. So let's say again that the key problem, I think, with this particular season was that there were all these characters and none of them really had any stakes. None of them really had anything to do. Okay, the Caleb character had, he had an arc, but you never really invested enough in his past because it was confusing and because you knew that Westworld was always going to try to turn it for a loop, so you thought maybe at the end he was going to be another version of Dolores or something, and that ended up not happening. So Dolores's still exist. Nothing really happened there. The world has changed, but we haven't really been shown how yet, and this all seemed extremely final, as if there wasn't a whole lot more to say. And yet, it wasn't satisfying. A lot of people have compared the ending of this season to Fight Club and the ending of Fight Club. So that doesn't bother me because I think that there are only so many ways that you can show major catastrophic events happening and that actually sound like they make sense. This is just one of them. So, okay, we move on. But the big question is, and I guess it's a two-part question. Number one, where will Westworld go next as a series? And number two, do we care? Is Westworld going to continue to try to get bigger as it goes into season 4, which presumably, if it does happen at all, is going to be sometime around late 2022? Are they going to try to encompass all of time and space? Because they've already encompassed all of the planet Earth and also this mythical realm called the Sublime. Where are they going to go? And are we going to care? And are they going to continue to give us characters that we actually care about, or at least kind of build up some of our love for the characters that we had? The Bernard character was very underutilized this season, and we kind of didn't care a lot about him. The same thing about the William/Man in Black kind of character. Didn't seem like it really was there for anything but almost comic relief. Didn't end up contributing anything from the beginning to the end. And it's just more like, oh, well, we've got this great actor and we're going to do something with him, and we have him contracted for the season. We got to do something. Okay. So they did. And the bigger question is, are we going to come around and care? With taking about 2 years for every season, you have to build a lot of care and loyalty into these characters. You have to really want to see them, to come back to them after 2 years. And this season didn't really build a compelling reason for us to revisit these characters 2 years from now. It's very hard for all of us right now to envision what the world is going to look like 2 years from now. There's a big spread of it could look really, really wonderful, and we could have learned an awful lot of great things, or it could look exactly the opposite. And it's hard for us to know what that's going to be. But the last thing that we really want to think about right now is the consequences of something world-ending, like the end of Westworld Season 3. Now, they didn't know when they wrote all of this the way the world was going to look when they aired it, and nobody did. And so I don't blame them for that. I forgive them for that. But what I don't forgive them for is just that, none of these characters became incredibly investable. You didn't care about Serac. I cared more about whether or not his name was an anagram for something, because Serac is cares backwards, and I felt like his name was weird enough that it probably meant something, and that never meant anything. Because remember, Westworld used anagrams before, when we found out that Bernard was actually Arnold. So did it mean anything? No, it didn't mean anything. Are we going to care about the Dolores clones now that they're all going to be played by characters or by actors who are not Evan Rachel Wood, who's been the steward of that character for all this time? I don't know. This might be the perfect time for the show to end, and it might make sense to completely revisit it from the beginning and watch all 30 episodes in much closer proximity to see if they make sense that way. And I don't know. With HBO Max launching, we're going to see a lot more new series, a lot more interesting series. And so remember when HBO first optioned Westworld, they were changing rapidly. The AT&T purchase was still extremely new, and the focus on new content and continuing to expand that from where at one point HBO had just one series a year that was really kind of must-watch TV, and now moving to a year-round schedule of stuff that you must see. Things were changing, and so now they're changing even more. With HBO Max, there's going to be even more focus on content, and 2 years from now, will we even want to pick Westworld up again? It's an extremely expensive series to make, and so I think that we have to start talking about that, and the people at AT&T have to start talking about that, and whether or not it's just time to let the thing go. Westworld, the show, was an incredible experiment, and I liked Season 1 and what Season 1 had to say so much. Season 2 began, now that we can look at it, Season 2 began to fragment things in ways that made it hard for us to know which characters to actually like, and Season 3 doubled down on that. There were so many characters thrown at us, we didn't know which ones to actually like, and there were some of them that were just hard to understand, hard to know who they were, and we didn't get enough backstory on any of them to really care. So I'm going to say, bottom line, and I'm aware of the fact this is probably my longest podcast ever, that it's time to let Westworld go. We made it from the beginning of the park to the end of the world, and I don't think there's a whole lot more story to tell. HBO should probably focus on new content that's going to be just as enjoyable and leave this one behind.